All right, Dr. Palmer, human-centered artificial intelligence. What does that mean?
All right. So before we even really dive into it, I need folks to really listen to this part. Okay. It's not just going to be the technology itself. It's really going to be how we adopt it as a people and as organizations. So when we talk about human-centered AI implementation, what we're really talking about is putting people first in the process of adoption. Too often, organizations roll out new technology as if it's just a switch to flip. And I think that's what a lot of people are having a problem with, because they've turned it on and everybody is using it. But AI is actually very different. It affects how people make decisions and how they feel about their work, and even how they understand their own value within an organization. So if we don't center people in the process, the adoption of that process fails. Okay. And we need to acknowledge it and understand it. So what human-centered design looks like in this context, it means three things. First, with people, not for people. Employees should be co-creators in shaping how AI shows up in their workflow. Second, we have to prioritize education before expectation. People need to understand what the tool does and what it doesn't do, and what their role is in verifying and refining it for their different outputs. That's why I asked you to pay attention to the educational portion, because it's really not optional. It really is the foundation. And I'm not just saying that because I love education, but it's a real thing that you really need to make sure that you are creating and building from. Third is we implement with transparency and feedback loop. So you have to make sure that those things are already in place. Employees need to know how data is being used, where AI makes its decisions, and they should have a channel to raise concerns as well as suggest improvement. So in short, if you haven't heard anything else, human-centered AI implementation isn't about the newest model or the latest app to use. It's about the trust, collaboration, and ongoing education that it takes for you to actually even know what you're doing. If we treat AI as only a technical upgrade, you're going to miss it. You're going to absolutely miss it. But if we treat it as a people-first process, we'll unlock an adoption that's not just effective, but at the end of the day, is sustainable. People are in the forefront of AI, not AI itself.
I love it. And if we think about one area that AI could really help in a big way, is if we think about workflow optimization. So when we think about the things that we need people to do, but our brains are lazy, number one, we are all very busy. And so if you think about how can we use AI to make people actually understand what to do and when to do it. So as we deal a lot in our work with heads of HR, and they're constantly, if there's one thing they're being asked, it's to optimize processes, elevate the employee experience, and oh, by the way, keep compliance tight. So all of these things, and they've invested so much money in big HRIS like Workday or an SAP. And we know the power of those big HRIS. They can do anything for anyone at any time. But if you've ever tried to get an enhancement or get in line for an enhancement with Workday, get developers to prioritize your request, unless you're like payroll. Payroll is the only thing we got to pay people. So that always gets prioritized within your HRIS. But if you're trying to create a workflow so that when a manager has a new employee and they need to update the job description, you want them to watch a little micro learning on the barriers to good hiring or some pitfalls of hiring. Instead of thinking about, well, how can I go into Workday and create this workflow? You could actually create an agent that sits on top of your HRIS and nudges that right behavior at the right moment directly in whatever collaboration tool your manager uses today. So whether that's Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google Chat. And so you could actually create that agent that says, hey, we just got a notification through Workday that you've opened a rec. And it will send them a message that might say something like, hey, before you post, review your job description. Here it is. And would you like me to make it more inclusive and sharper? By the way, here's a 2-minute micro lesson on hiring pitfalls. And then when they're done, they can actually just say, yes, I'm ready to post this. go. And all of that happens without you ever touching your core HRIS. It's more of that sitting on top of it. So I guess if I think about it, you're not actually changing the system, you're changing the moment, right? You need to get in there at the moment where these things are happening and support them. And I really feel like that's a good use case for AI.
Absolutely. I want to use your phrasing, and it's let's get tactical for a moment, because that's love saying that. So I'm going to steal that right now. So one of the mistakes we see over and over in AI adoption is relying on this one size fits all tool, right? So the problem ends up being that those tools don't actually reflect the industry. It doesn't reflect the workflow, nor does it reflect the people. So you may be checking a box, but they don't actually solve the actual problem that you're facing. And that's why we customize, and you have to have a custom solution in order to really get what you need to get. It's about really building, or even more specifically saying like tailoring AI to fit your organization's specific needs. So think about it like clothing. Buying something off the rack works in a pinch. I hate buying off the rack. I'm gonna tell you that. I'm not the tallest person. I know I look different, but all of my clothes have to be tailored because I'm not tall enough for my pants. So a tailored suit always fits better because it's made for me. And it builds confidence, and it holds up over time. A tailored suit is always going to hold up over time. And it's the same with AI tools. Off the shelf platforms are fine for those quick wins, but a long-term impact has to be tailored to your process, to your data, to your culture. All right. So tactically, this means three things. First, you got to map these pain points. Where are people losing time? What decisions keep getting stalled? And then you make a custom solution that focuses on that. So the next point of that is co-create with end users. Don't just hand them a tool, bring them into the design process so what is built actually matches your workflow. And then third, pilot, refine, scale. Start small, get feedback, and then grow the tool across the team once you know how it works. So the takeaway here is going to be simple. AI adoption isn't about plugging in the same tool so that everyone is just using it. It's about designing the right tool for the right context so that we can move beyond just this one size fits all. And that's actually how you build the solution that actually is usable and sustainable. I'm gonna keep saying sustainable because it needs to be something that works over time, especially when you take into account the environmental impact. You need to make sure that what you are building actually fits the scenario to which you need it. So we'll just take something simple like audio file. So a command is transcribe this audio file. It does that, gives you exactly what you asked for. A prompt is then, after transcribing this audio, what patterns do you notice in how the speaker talks about leadership? What might be the next steps in analyzing that data? You are being very specific in what you want it to do, because what you're asking AI now to do is to go beyond the raw transcript. You want it to interpret, you want it to synthesize, and you want it to make suggestions. The next part of that, the third part now, is recommend. That's really the era that we're in. Not only do we want it to provide us with everything necessary, now you want it to apply what we need it to do. How do you now apply that thing? So now this actionable next step becomes, what specific things can I do to improve based on these themes that have been given? You're asking it now for the next step in interpreting and analyzing. That recommendation is really where we are with agentic AI. We're in the mode now to allow all this information to be interpreted so that we can apply it to what we need it to do. That's the cool thing about going just from generative to now agentic. That makes sense?
Yeah. So let me make sure I get this right. So let's go back to my scenario where I'm creating a workflow so that
Mhm.
I nudge my managers at that moment that they have a job rec open. And I want to nudge them on 5 things. In the old world, I say old world like yesterday, you used to have to go and be so thoughtful about what you're designing because, again, you're touching a Workday SAP. You're going to get to touch it once every 6 months because so I might have to go, let me get 50 people in a room and let's think through the exact workflow. Exactly what do we want it to do? We've got to get it pretty dang close to being right before I go and ask my developers my one shot to get my code done before in front of payroll, if I ever get there. With this is so different because it really is. Think about it like a pilot to say, we're going to create this agent and then we can change it so quickly and it's not a huge rewrite every time, or we're not having to do a bunch of testing and making sure that so it doesn't mess up the rest of our system. So is that the right way to think about it? It is a opportunity to pilot something, and you might eventually put that workflow into Workday, or you may just keep it as an agent forever.
Mhm. Absolutely. You absolutely want to be able to use that. And the cool thing is that you can edit it and customize it based on the information you have. Like the more information that you have, the better that you can make that agent. And you can do that at any point, and it keeps the flow continuously going because now that it has new information to pull from, it'll just keep going, pulling from now this new information. You have to reset and realign it like we used to have to do, but you don't have to do that anymore. Like that we are now at a point that you can just update as necessary and it keeps your workflow going at the same pace. And if you need to stop anything, it's easy to stop, make changes, and keep going as well.
So I guess if I was looking at this and saying to my HR teams, again, your first thing was don't change the system, just nudge the people and change the moment. So if we look at now, I think we've probably convinced people, hey, we need to look at this. We need to think about this. Now let's think about how we actually consider change management and upskilling. How do we get people to think about this as a resource, as an ad, and not anything to be afraid of? And so when we think about this is not your classic 3-day class for everyone that you go and you throw them into and you teach them about. This is more small practical learnings with maybe some 5-minute videos and some quick ideas for them. Like, how do you draft an agenda? How do you not only draft the agenda, but set the goals and the outcomes and who should be in the meeting? All of these practical tips. You could also give them examples to use at home. Okay, create me a 5-day menu for my family. What questions do you have for me before you start to create this 5-day, which gets it back to that responsible side. And then it'll come back and it'll say, hey, how many people? What do you like to eat? What do you want to avoid? How many days do you want to cook? Do you like leftovers? It's going to ask you all these questions. So I think the key to them is maybe the best way to start learning is at home. And if you give your employees some ideas on uses at home, they could start using it every day and then come back to the workplace a little more educated. What do you think?
So as you're talking, I'm like, well, I think the way that we've been kind of socialized to think about AI is that we command it, right? Like I'm going to give it this command, and it's gonna follow through with what I'm commanding. So let me just kind of give a quick differentiator between what a prompt is and a command. So when I say prompt, I'm talking about it's like a conversation starter. So it's open ended, descriptive, and it often invites the AI to generate, create, and explore a possibility. So, for example, if I say, write a 2-paragraph overview of a sustainable supply chain in plain language, that's a prompt. I frame the request. The AI has the flexibility of now how to respond. A command, however, is a directive. So it's precise, it's action oriented, and usually leaves less room for interpretation. Remember, it's generating an idea, not creating a new one. So that's how a lot of folks kind of get messed up, because when you think about a command, summarize this article and give me 3 bullets. That's how we would say that, and students do it all the time. That's a command. See, you're just telling AI what to do and how to structure the output. We have to think more as prompts because this actually creates exploration. So as you were saying, you prompted it to do something and then it asks you very specific questions to refine what you need. That's the generative opportunity that it provides. And you do that at home so that you can figure out how to create something that really is a prompt to get you what you really want and not just commanding it to do something, because what you're doing is you're boxing it in. It can't think outside of the command that you gave it because you gave it a directive. So you're saying, do this and do that only. It can't do that. It has to explore. And so you have to make sure that you're prompting. So I definitely say practice doing that because that's what a lot of people are running into. And that's actually what's causing a lot of frustration. They're commanding and they're giving it a directive when in fact they need to learn how to create prompts. And if you have prompts for your workflows that you have to do all the time, you can refine them. That actually gets you to doing whatever you need to do a lot better. It's no different than if you're labeling or coding something in some type of, specifically in HRS. It's a code, right? You have a label that you need to give it. Make sure you're doing the same thing with your prompts. What do you want it to explore so that it can then give you what you need without trying to direct it?
I love it. So I know there's a lot of sourdough people out there with me right now. So let's give an example of a command versus a prompt. So a command might be, hey, I love Claude. Hey Claude, can you write me a recipe for sourdough bread and pumpkin? And because I'm into pumpkin fall, right? Pumpkin spice sourdough bread. I'm going to get back a recipe for pumpkin spice sourdough bread. But more of that's a command, right? But maybe my prompt might be, I'm looking to create a pumpkin sourdough bread. I've seen a lot of recipes. What kind of thoughts do you have? What would make it interesting? I live in Denver, so I've got altitude to think about. And what's your thoughts? And it might come back and say, hey, what about adding some nuts or some fruit? Or what else do you have going? It might ask me some more questions. Is that a good way to think about it? Or how would you explore more? Because it might say, hey, what about adding cinnamon and nutmeg and something else? Have you thought about that?
Absolutely. So again, remember, it's just a prompt is exploratory and it's open ended. So let's say explain, right? It's telling you what you need it to do, as opposed to a command, which is just asking you. So list these things. That is, it's very finite that what it can work within. And so when you are prompting, you want to give it as much leeway to do, because one of the things I think that you did really well is I live in Denver, so there's an altitude. It then is now expanding to say, how will this bread rise differently than show me how to make sourdough bread? It's not even going to take that into consideration because you didn't tell it to do that. So that, and then when it comes back with, hey, add nuts, you can say, well, my 5-year-old actually has a nut allergy. What are some other options? It's going to expand to be able to do that. You can really customize your question based on your prompt. And so again, we grew up in sci-fi. You tell me what to do. Siri, turn on, right? That's generating. It's generating an output. Now you're telling Siri, explain to me classical music. She's going to talk for a lot longer than just, let me give you some Beethoven. She's going to explain, and then she's going to give you options of what type of genre within classical music do you now want to listen to. You've opened up and you've expanded. That's an assistant. That's what your assistant would actually ask. So remember, when you're asking these questions, talk to it like you're talking to a 25-year-old rather than a 13-year-old. When you talk to a 13-year-old, give me this, come back. It's a directive because they can't think outside of themselves. So it's like, pick this up, bring it to me. Okay. A 25-year-old, give me these things. Provide me with this understanding. Explain to me why you need to do this. That gives a little bit more continuity of what needs to be said. So for those parents out there or who are raising young adults and into early professionals, if you're guiding a team that has some early professionals on it, think about what you actually need them to think through critically in your prompt, as opposed to asking them to just list or provide you an answer. Those are not one and the same. I hope that gives a little bit, because I'm thinking about my students. If I tell them to write a paper, they're going to write that paper. That's it. They're not even going to think about grammar. They're not going to take any of that into consideration. When I say critically analyze X, Y, and Z, they then have to say, okay, I need citations. I need to make sure that I'm explaining this. I'm providing you with an introduction. I'm providing you references. That just say critically analyze change from writing a paper. So I use that.